I never meddle. You know that, right? There's a reason why I don't meddle, because in order for somebody who's a ministry head to be anointed by God, they have to connect and hear from God for themselves. If you have people in charge of things and you're micromanaging, it's a big mistake, or you don't have the right people. One or the other. But yeah, I don't get involved. But the other day I sent him this song, Carried to the Table, and I was really reluctant. I really was reluctant because I don't like to feel like I'm even trying to, you know what I mean? But the Lord said, send it, and I sent it, and he sent me back a text, and he goes, wow, I never heard this song, but somebody just sent it to me yesterday. And I was like, all right, we're on to something. And then Fall Face Down, I mean, Matt Redman, that's one of my favorite songs. You know, first, that's me. That's how I connect. It's all about worship and falling face down. It's not about, you know, I got another rip in my jeans, and that's just not my contemporary stuff. Just doesn't do it for me. Anyway, nice job. So last Shabbat was a struggle, not just because of what I was going through, but I knew it was going to be a lot of plowing, and I don't really like that too much, but there had to be plowing to get to today, and today was the objective for me, but it had to be done. So last week we spoke about the King's Table. We said it's a place of privilege, a place of honor, and a place of blessing. And we mentioned the cast of characters that sat at King David's table, because we know more about David than all the other kings put together. I mean, it's not even close. David is a major, major, major player, and his life is opened up to us and for us to glean from. And we mentioned 3 of his sons that we knew about. The other ones we don't know much about. Amnon, the firstborn, he blew it. Absalom, the third, he blew it. And Solomon, the 10th, he blew it. And then we moved into his trusted commander-in-chief, Joab, and he really blew it. And then Abiathar, the high priest, and he blew it. And so the Bible speaks about the fact that all 5 of these characters dishonored the privilege of sitting at the king's table. But then the Bible mentions one more person that we know that sat at the king's table. You know who he is. You got the scriptures. But he was a very unlikely candidate. He had no business being at the king's table. And we'll get into it with the scriptures, and you'll see. I'm sure you know this already, but I'm probably going to bring out a couple of things that are going to emphasize the fact that he had no business being at the king's table. Let's take a look at the first few scriptures we have. We don't have too many. This is his story. It starts in 2 Samuel 9. David inquired, quote, when it's a quote, it's a direct quote from the person. In this case, it's King David. Is there anyone still alive from the family of Shaul, that's Saul, to whom, for Jehonathan's sake, Jonathan, I can show kindness? And the only reason I read this in the complete Jewish version is because I want you to realize that the whole Old Testament was written by Jews to Jews in a Jewish place about a Jewish king. I want you to rearrange your Western thinking to more Eastern thinking. You know, when I go overseas, if I'm in Africa, I have an interpreter speaking Swahili. I think you just have to realize that Yeshua spoke Hebrew, not the king's English. And I know it's a big tweak. I understand the holidays versus the holidays used to do. I know it's a tweak, but a tweak nevertheless that's necessary. In Shaul's household there had been a servant named Ziva, and they summoned him to David. The king asked him, quote, "Are you Ziva?" And he answered, "At your service." The king said, "Is there anyone still alive from the family of Shaul to whom I can show God's grace?" David understood grace all too well, right? I mean, he committed. It was a bad chapter in his life. It wasn't his whole life. David was incredibly faithful, but it was a bad chapter, right? He took his best friend's wife, his general. Then when he brings the general home, because he's like, what do I do? She's preggo. I can't, I'll be embarrassed. The whole kingdom will be embarrassed. God will be embarrassed. I know what I'll do. I'll bring her husband back. She's probably only pregnant a few weeks. He'll go in and sleep with her, and voila, problem averted. What he didn't know is that he was a righteous man. And when he brought him back, what was his name? Hello? Uriah the Hittite. And Uriah was a righteous man. And he was outside his house at night, and David was like, what are you doing? Go into your wife. And he says, I can't enjoy the pleasure of my wife while my soldiers are fighting on the battlefield. I'll stay outside. Oops. Now what? Now you got to kill him. So he sends him to the front line. He takes him out. That's crazy, right? This is real life, guys, with real people. I know you think when you come into church, you get sprinkled with gold dust and you're pure. Anyway, weren't you waiting for this all your life when you were sitting in a place that just wasn't real? Weren't you waiting to be just real? And to serve a God who's real? And to deal with the reality of life? As opposed to this sterile, starts at 10, ends at 11:20. We know exactly when the elder's going to come up and say this. And no room for anything. Anyway, that's another story. Okay, fine. That wasn't his story. That was mine. I'm sorry. I just feel bad. I've spoken at hundreds of places, and I just feel bad what people have to sit through. I'd kill myself if I had to sit through that. I'm not kidding you. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I just could not put on. I just couldn't do it. How do you do that? And then go home and you just, it's like you leave your problems outside the door. You come in for now, and then you just pick them right back up.
We didn't know any better, Rabbi.
You should have known better. I mean, don't trust the guy up here. I never asked you to trust me. I told you to read and study. You see, the church, and even the Messianic community, when I say the church, don't get your little undies in a wad. What I'm saying is, the body of Messiah, what they do is they don't free you from the chains. They just polish the chains up. The king said, is there still anyone from the family of Shaul to whom I can show God's grace? Siba said to the king, there is still only one left. The Philistines massacred them, right? I mean, Saul committed suicide. He fell on his sword, but his son Jonathan, they killed them all in battle. And there was one left from his house. Yochanan's son, and he says, with the lame legs. I don't know why we describe people by their... Do you know what I mean? Hey, you know that guy Dave? Dave. With the lazy eye? Oh, Dave. You know what I mean? That's crazy. Why don't we talk about something good about them? Anyway, I don't know why human beings do that, but... Okay, so Saul's dead, and David becomes king over all of Israel. And by the way, he was anointed way before this by Samuel. Right? He knew he was going to be king. Did he try to take it over by himself? What did he do? Years and years. See, we live in a society that waits for nothing. Rabbi, I texted you 2 minutes ago. We wait for nothing. We're microwaved. We want everything yesterday. Right? Even when we pray, Lord, give me patience and give it to me right now. So David is now king over Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, became king, but for like 2 years over just the northern tribes. He was assassinated. It wasn't his call to become king. And David remembers what? What does he remember here? He becomes king and he remembers right away something. A covenant. Guys, we serve a covenant-making and a covenant-keeping God. I don't know if you know this or not. But our God made a covenant with us. And when we said, I do, we were supposed to keep our end of the bargain. But today, she burnt the steak, I'm done. He's the king now. He remembers the covenant. Where's the covenant? Had to be before this, right? It's got to be in the book of Samuel, but it's before this, so it's got to be in 1 Samuel. So at least you know where to go. And it's towards the end, so it's chapter 20. You go home, look at it, verses 14 to 17. You'll see David makes a covenant with Jonathan. They were buds. Inseparable buds. From the time they met, they were buds. And even Jonathan was like, my dad wants to kill you. You should kind of take him out. He's like, nope. You don't touch God's anointed. Remember, he cut his garment when he was urinating in the caves in En-Gedi? I take them to En-Gedi. I go, I wonder what the cave is. And they're like, yeah, which one is it, Rabbi? I'm like, are you nuts? Who cares? You want to know where Saul urinated? Are you out of your mind? There's always like one lady on the trip who's like really into it. And I go, it's that cave. She goes, ooh. She goes inside. I don't understand. Yeah, we get a lot of interesting people in the Messianic world, I'm just telling you. I'm thinking about a story. Remember the lady that when we went in the catacombs, she goes, Rabbi, don't say her name. No, she goes, Rabbi, Esther was here. And I said, this is a civilization that wasn't here when Esther was alive. And she thinks for a minute, she goes, all I know is God told me Esther was here. How can you argue with that logic? Irrefutable. So he made a covenant with Jonathan. He said, when I become king, and he knew he would, and Jonathan knew he would, because at this point his father was out of his mind, killed 85 priests. 85 priests of God he slaughtered in cold blood. He said, if there's anybody left in your house, trust me, I'll take care of them. People give their word a lot. Their word is not their bond anymore. You got to have agreements, prenuptial agreements now. I'm going to marry her forever, but just in case she ain't getting my money. Run from that guy. Are you out of your mind? You sign that thing? That's a red flag. Just saying. So he wants to know if there's anybody left. Why is Ziba not really thinking it's going to go well for Mephibosheth? What do you think? When there's a change of dynasty, you kill off anybody from that other dynasty. Why? Because there's always an insurrection. Right? Makes sense? I mean, it shouldn't be, but this is the way it is. This is the way it is. So, Ziba was a servant of the late King Saul. Not only that, he was the steward, the head steward of King Saul's estate. And he's summoned. What do you think Ziba is thinking? Lights out. Right? He's serving like David's arch enemy, even though David didn't see him as an enemy. But remember what kind of got him angry, Saul? He loved David. He loved David. He put him ahead of his whole military. David used to play for harp for him and soothe him. What happened? They came back from a battle against the Philistines, and the women came out singing, and they said, Saul kills his thousands, David his tens of thousands. Arrgh! Jealousy. Stop being so jealous. What's it to you? In fact, you should be happy when somebody's blessed. Right? Oh, I can't believe the car they're driving. Did they ask you to pay for the gas or make the payment? They're in debt up to their eyeballs. That's their problem. Don't worry about it. Don't be jealous. Be happy you're not in debt. So Ziba's like, lights out for me. This is it. And he comes before David, at your service, little suck up. And he tells him that there's a lame son. What happened to, do we know what happened to Mephibosheth? Does the scriptures tell us? Yes. What does it say? He was dropped. When? 5 years old. And why? Why was he dropped? The nurse was fleeing because the Philistines were encroaching and he was the only one left. He was next in line to be the king. That's all she knew, and she was doing the right thing. And she rushed and dropped him both legs. No orthopedic surgeons, no MRIs, no team doctor came out on the field. The bones said all screwed up and he was a mess. Couldn't really walk properly. Totally disabled. his legs became deformed. You'll read that, by the way, 2 Samuel 4:4, if you're interested. Write down notes. I know people at home write down notes. Okay, so let's see what happens next. The next couple of verses, 4 and 5, 2 Samuel 9, we're still there. The king says to him, where is he? Like immediately. Jonathan's got a son left? There's only one person left. Where is he? And Ziba answered, he's there in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel in Lodabar. King David sent and took him from the house immediately of Machir, the son of Amiel in Lodabar. So David inquires his whereabouts. He's excited. You know, wow, Jonathan's got a son. My best buddy has a son. I can keep my word. I could bless him. Isn't that sweet? David was a good dude, seriously. Don't focus on the mishap. He was a good dude. Because if you focus on David's mishap, then God's going to focus on yours. Sounds like a good thing? Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. So he was told he was living in Lodabar, which is on the east side of the Jordan, with Machir. Who's Machir? Bible tells us he's a powerful chief of one of the Transjordan tribes. He was taking care of him, which is right because he was respectful of King Saul. So he cared for Mephibosheth for many years. When you read this and you read a chapter ends in it could be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years that pass. Sometimes Abraham hears from God, then he doesn't hear from him for 20 years. We think it was the next day because we lose the chronology, we lose a timeline. We don't look at the timeline. We're not really interested in the timeline, but I'm a very boring person and I'm interested in timelines. Then he's brought to Jerusalem. Look at the next couple of verses, 6 and 8. Mephibosheth, the son of Yehohanan, the son of Shaul, came to David, fell on his face. Not, hey, Dave, like we tend to do. We call the pastor Dave, slap him in the back of the head because we want him to be one of us. He's got a big responsibility. Call a cop officer. Call a teacher, ma'am and sir. Call your parent, ma'am and sir. Have a little reverence and have a little respect. There's no decorum anymore. I was just telling Bernadette, if there wasn't low class, there'd be no class at all. Used to check into a hotel with nice clothes. Now you check in with a tank top and yoga pants. It's a mess. I went to Vegas one time back in, 82 for something. And you had to wear a jacket and a gown to get into I didn't gamble. I went there to meet a friend, but the fact is and it was nice. You dressed up. And then I took Max to the Grand Canyon and Zion Canyon and a couple of canyons. He was acting up at the time, and I said, if you keep acting up, you're going to end up in one of these canyons. That's not what happened. But we went to the canyons, and the last part of this canyon tour, you go for the night in Las Vegas because you got to take a red eye in the morning. That's how it works. That's most efficient. So I wanted to take the kid. He was like nine, I think. I wanted to take him to like a really nice steakhouse. I go in the steakhouse, and there's a guy with a flat bill, a tank top, tats, which is fine. But I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like a top steakhouse. So I called the maitre d' over. I go, look, I'm just curious. I came here 30 years ago. You had to wear a jacket. What's with this? He says, you see that guy with the flat bill and the tats? He just bought a $900 bottle of wine. Enough said. In other words, they don't want to dress up, but they want to spend money, and all we give a crap about is money. Don't freaking sell out for $1. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. It's never worth it. Sleep well at night. So Mephibosheth prostrates himself. So what's he thinking? Lights out. Right? I'm going to die. This is it. He was hiding. He was in hiding. He wasn't feeling good about it. He was in hiding. He knew. Then he heard David became king. And David summons him. Here is your servant! Exclamation point. Laying down, face down. David said to him, don't be afraid, for I am determined to be kind to you for the sake of Yehonatan, your father. You should be determined to be kind to people for the sake of your father. Just throwing that in there. I will restore to you all the land Shaul, your grandfather, and you will always eat at my table. He prostrated himself again and said, what is your servant that makes you pay so much attention to a dead dog like me? David says, don't be afraid, because obviously he was, and he had good reason to. Mephibosheth was next in line to be the king of Israel. He definitely thought he was going to be taken out that day. Dead dog is an expression, a biblical expression. It's an expression of self-abasement and shame. In the Bible, when you see somebody refer to somebody else as a dead dog, and you'll see it other places, not many, other places, it's a biblical term meaning broken and totally worthless. Worth nothing. Nothing. When Samuel writes to me, and we send him, I just sent him money, we sent him money to build an orphanage, and we don't send him $100, guys. We don't send him $10,000, guys. We don't do that. That's not Beth Yeshua. We don't play. And we're blessed. The more we send out, the more keeps coming. I tell you all the time, you don't have to give if you don't want to. Really. I mean that wholeheartedly. If you have somebody in your family that needs something, it's not an issue. I know that might come as a shock, but God always provides here. Always. 20 years I'm here. And ask anybody who's here for 20 years. I've never done a sermon on money and or tithing. Never had a special offering. If it's God's will, it's God's bill. And if you got to cajole people, it's probably not God. Sound about right? Any of you people been around the block a few times? All right, just let me know you're alive, because I think I'm looking at a painting and I think I'm losing my mind. When Samuel writes to me, he goes, why do you want to help a dead dog like me? And I write back to him, because I'm a dead dog just like you. We all are. We just sort of forgot. All right, so let's see the rest of the story. We don't have much more. 9 and 10 of 2 Samuel 9. The king called to Ziba, Shaul's servant, and said to him, I have given everything Shaul and his family owned to your master's grandson. David doesn't know what's going on with Ziba and the grandson, but Ziba is not happy. You ought to work the land for him, you and your sons. He had 15 sons. They became his slave. Harvest the crops so that your master's grandson will have food to feed his family. So obviously he's not 5 years old anymore, right? Yeah, he's been there a long time. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will always eat at my table. This is so... Man, the first time I read this many moons ago, I was floored. One of my favorites. David ordered that the family property would be returned to Mephibosheth, and he arranged to have him eat at his table. Now, Mephibosheth had no business being at the table. David was treating him as his own son. Basically, he said to Jonathan, any son of yours is a son of mine. Now, you've heard people say that, right? And trust me, we have. There was at least 3 different sets of people here that were in our will to take care of our children should anything happen to them. Where are they now? We had to change the will 4 times. So we stopped putting you guys in the will. You're not in the will anymore. Okay, nobody's in my will, it's here. It's sad. They gave me their word. My word is my freaking bond. I don't need no attorney to sign off on it. If I tell you I'm going to do something, it's done. If I tell you I'm not going to do something, I'm not going to do it. It's that simple. Where did that go? What happened to that? Out of style. What a privilege. I mean, Mephibosheth is just a crippled kid in hiding. Listen, in the Middle Ages, do you know what they did with crippled people? They burned them at the stake till the demons came out of them. Obviously, the demons never came out, so they just died. Middle Ages, for hundreds of years. Do you know in cultures today, I knew a girl from Iraq. She was thrown out in the garbage because she had her limbs, tossed. They're worthless. Hitler killed all the cripples right away and the disabled. It's only been recent that we, make things handicap accessible. Very recent. But that wasn't God's plan. Back in the Torah, he wanted the disabled to be taken care of and be treated equally. That's the Lord, not man. The Lord. What a privilege it was for him. He never thought in a million years, I'm being taken out and I'm being treated as one of David's own sons? That's unbelievable. Guys, that's unbelievable. That's like somebody going from the projects to the palace. Continue on with the story. Bringing it a few chapters later, we'll just finish here. 2 Samuel 19, 24, 25. Mephibosheth, the son of Shaul, came down to meet the king. What happened? Why did the king return? Where did he go? We left a lot out. King David split because Absalom formed an insurrection, and he knew that his army would take out Absalom's any day of the week, and he knew that Absalom would die. So to protect his son, he humiliated himself and walked through the Kidron Valley, right? He left the east gate, walked through the Kidron Valley, and went up the Mount of Olives and went away. Well, there's another king that's coming, and he's going to step down on the Mount of Olives, come through the Kidron Valley, and go through the eastern gate, and be the King of Kings. People say to me all the time, Rabbi, is that legitimate? The kingdom is going to come? What Bible are you reading? Your goal as a believer, Christian, whatever the heck you want to call yourself, is not to go to heaven. It's for the king to return to the earth and set up his kingdom. The gospel is not the gospel unless it's the gospel of the kingdom of God. It's the gospel of the kingdom. Nowhere in the Bible does it say preach the gospel. That's what we do. Save them, click, go to heaven, say prayer, go to heaven, say prayer, go to heaven, say prayer. It's nonsense. It's the gospel of the kingdom. I don't want to be a vapor playing a harp. I want to have a body. I want to have friends. I want to eat some good food without getting fat. He's going to restore. We'll be rewarded. It's restored. Genesis 1, 2, everything's perfect. Revelation 21, 22, everything's perfect again. You don't want to miss that. Don't teach that that's not going to happen. The king is coming back physically. I don't care what your denomination teaches. That's what it says. It's not symbolic. It's not figurative. It's literal. So David returns from exile. He looks at Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth comes to meet him along with Ziba and a bunch of other people. And he notices that Mephibosheth hadn't cared for his legs. Probably had sores, probably had massive infections. They used herbs back then, of course. And we all know today that herbs don't work, right? But anyway, so he didn't care for his legs. They were infected, sores oozing probably. Didn't trim his beard. David wasn't gone for a week. He didn't wash his clothes from the day the king had left until the day he came home in peace. When he came to Jerusalem to meet the king said, David, why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth? So he returns from exile. Ziba, who had slandered Mephibosheth. Ziba slandered Mephibosheth. When you go home, go to chapter 17. You'll see. So Mephibosheth comes, Ziba comes, and it was obvious from his appearance, what was he doing? Mourning. He was mourning David's exile from the time it began. He had been truly loyal to the king in spite of Ziba's false charges that said, yeah, he didn't come. When Ziba went to the king, he had 2 donkeys. Ziba had one and Mephibosheth had one. He brought both donkeys. He just pulled the rug out from him and then told David, oh, you know the kid that you let sit at your table? The kid that you gave the privilege and the honor to, the crippled kid? He said, I'm next to be king. You go. Go with David. I'll take over. Slandered him. But the king didn't know about this. All the king knows is, I took such good care of you. I loved your dad so much. They ate at my table, and he didn't have the decency to come with me. So David spoke roughly to him. He felt betrayed. You understand? You feeling this? Don't be fundamental. You're going to miss it, man. You're going to miss God. You're going to know all the scriptures and not know, you're going to know the word of the Lord, but you're not going to know the Lord of the word. Don't miss that, man. That changes everything. That's the game changer. He felt betrayed. So let's see what happens. 26:28. He answered him, this is Mephibosheth, my Lord King, my servant deceived me. He didn't say it like that. I say it like that because I'd like to give Zebra. Anyway, I, your servant, had said, I will saddle a donkey for myself to ride on and go with the king, since your servant is lame. But he slandered me, your servant, to my lord the king. However, my lord the king is like an angel of God. So do whatever seems right to you. Do we say that to God? Whatever you see fit, whatever has to be. No, we tell him what we want. Sometimes what we deserve. Don't tell him what you deserve. You don't want that. For all my father's household deserve death. So, don't you understand? So do we. Look, here's the deal, okay? Here's the deal. I'm a believer 33 years every day. I've hung with God, hung out. Probably years and years ago, 20 years ago, my messages were really scholarly and had so much information. And I was probably doing that out of insecurity. So I want you guys to think I'm a scholar. And now they're so simple because it is so simple. There's two dimensions to God, only two. One is he lives in unapproachable light. He's holy. You can't approach him. You would disintegrate. Now, most believers don't realize that. Or they do, but they don't really believe it. They're like, come on. He's just a nice guy. No. He's holy. You'll disintegrate. You'll disintegrate. So something has to be done because he wants you, but if he pulls you in. So the other aspect, the other dimension is God is love. God is holy, God is love. Those are the two pillars. Those are two pillars in the kingdom. God is holy, God is love. And his love provides what his holiness demands. And that's what should overwhelm you. The cross should freak you out. You should, every time you think of the cross, you should be like Mephibosheth and prostrate yourself. No question about it. Seriously. No question in my mind. Sorry. No question. So he says, so do whatever seems right to you, for all my father's household deserve death at the hand of my lord, the king. Nevertheless, in spite of that, you placed your servant, Mephibosheth, with those who eat at your own table. He's like, he can't believe he was sitting at the table. You know, Solomon probably came in with his robes and his books, and Absalom came in with his little rebellious attitude. What's up, Pops? Joab came in with all the scars and all his muscles and his armor, put his spear down. Abiathar with his, his priestly garments, looking all religious. And then the crippled kid had to be carried. But every time he got to the table, he's like, wow, this is unbelievable. The other ones took it for granted. How many believers take it for granted? Or want so many other things except the Lord? Because we all know those other things are really important. Because stuff is great. I deserve nothing more, so why should I come crying any more to you, king? Some of us keep asking for the same things. We don't get it. It's like God's trying to tell us something. Mephibosheth explained that he asked his servant Ziba to saddle a donkey. He was helpless. He was slandered. Ziba falsely reported in 2 Samuel 16, oh, the son of Jonathan is staying in Jerusalem. He's hoping that the kingdom will return to King Saul, and thus he's next in line. What a lie. I mean, that's a huge lie. Huge. It's injustice. How many of us don't like injustice? Well, our story is scandalous. It's a scandal that we get to sit at the king's table. It's like a conspiracy of grace. But injustice doesn't matter to Mephibosheth. He didn't care. He didn't want the stuff. He could care less about the stuff. What's the stuff to him? He basically says, why should I complain? I'm a dead dog, and yet you summoned me to your table. What a lucky beggar I am. He's pumped. 29:30, the king said to him, why speak any more about these matters of yours? I say, you and Ziba divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, let him take it. You feeling it? For me, it's enough that my lord the king has come home in peace. If you don't see the parallels, golly jeepers. He says, let him take it all. All Mephibosheth cared about, the whole time he was carried to the table, was that the king should return and take his rightful throne in Jerusalem as the king of Israel. For Mephibosheth, it was all about the king. For us, it should be all about the king. Mephibosheth is a picture of a lost soul living in a barren land. Lo Devar, in English, means wasteland. God just got lucky. And he was sold unto sin. Machir, in English, means sold. Mephibosheth means shatter the shame. He was an outcast from the fallen house of Shaul, unable to come to the king to beg for mercy, being lame in both feet. But the gracious king, the gracious sovereign, sought him out in order to bless him. Once found, Mephibosheth was given a place of fellowship at the king's table. The parallels of salvation are blatantly obvious by now. You realize that. Like Mephibosheth, we were helpless, unable to come to God. Our condition was hopeless, being part of a fallen race. But by God's grace, we became objects of divine favor. We have been set in the family of God forever, sitting at the king's table. Not King David. King Yeshua. Now, the Berean call, I'm sure some of you got it. Did any of you get it? Any of you look at it? Okay. In the immortal words of Ron Popeil. You remember Ron Popeil? He was the first one to do an info commercial. But wait, there's more. Bernadette's like, oh no. You said we were going to stop here. No, they get 2 bonus screens because they're nice to me. But there's a condition. If you act now on the message, you'll get 2 bonus screens absolutely free. But you got to promise you're going to apply what I just said to your life and stop pissing and moaning so much. I just spoke to a guy this morning. He came here for a while and he's away. And he said, Rabbi, I'm in a wasteland. I said, I know it. It sucks not having a fellowship and not having a place to go, right? But sometimes you have to lose something to know what you have. Just saying. Let's take a look at 2 more screens and then we're out. Is that okay? Yeah, come on. SNS isn't even serving now, right? Luke 22, 28, 30. I think this is a magnificent screen. Watch this. This is Yeshua talking. You are the ones who have stayed with me throughout my trials, just as my Father gave me the right to rule, so I give you an appointment, namely to eat and drink at my What? Rabbi, I never saw that. I never saw that Yeshua talked about his table that they'd get to sit at. That's cool, right? Come on. Somebody be like, that's pretty cool. So it was gracious of the Lord to commend the disciples. He's saying, look, you guys have continued with me in my trials. It wasn't easy following him. Everybody hated him, and they hated everybody else who followed him. He told them, they hated me, they're going to hate you. We're not hated like that. We apply that scripture. Get out of town. Nobody's running after you to kill you because you're a believer. So cut it. Very soon, though, he knew that they would all forsake him and flee. Yet, he knew in his heart they loved him. And they would still endure the reproach for his name's sake, right? They ran, but they came back, and they all got killed. Their reward would be to eat and drink at his table. When? when he returns, just as David left, he'll return to take the throne of David and rule over the earth. The Bible is a progressive revelation. In the Torah, people have a hard time with the Torah because you get these naysayers and these antagonists of the faith, and even some believers. They're so miserable. They always try to point out one thing in the Torah that if we did it, like God's not good. So they take the exception. Like if you were a priest, right? In Leviticus, if you were a priest and you were lame, or you were a dwarf, as they say it in the Bible, or you had crushed testicles, anything that was wrong, you couldn't serve at the table. And people go, that's not nice. It's a progressive revelation. God still said you can eat at the table. What was he trying to show? That I live in unapproachable light. But in the future, instead of trying to get to my table, I'm going to send one to bring you to the table, and he's going to touch the lame and the leper and the blind. Not because he's better than me. I sent him. It's a progressive revelation to bring you to the table. They were untimely born. You're freaking blessed. Try to live up to the Torah perfectly. I dare you. It's impossible. Nobody can do it. That's why Yeshua had to be sent here. I wouldn't have wanted to live back then. You're blessed. The disciples were jealous of you. Their reward would be to sit at the table. But here's the incredible news. You want some great news? Okay, just as the disciples were promised by Yeshua a place at his table, so are we. What? Come on, make believe your team just scored. There you go. What table am I talking about? Look. Revelation 19. Remember? Genesis 3, we step on the scene and screw everything up. Revelation 19, Yeshua steps on the screen. And everything starts to spiral up. Quote, let us rejoice and be glad! Exclamation point. Let us give him the glory! Exclamation point. For the time has come for the wedding of the Lamb. What's happening here? The tribulation has passed. 7 years over. Babylon has been judged. Now it's time for the wedding. The wedding of the Lamb. The wedding of the Lamb and the wedding is the wedding feast is a little different, but they happen almost right after each other. But it's time for the wedding of the Lamb. A wedding in first century Judaism, I'm sure you're familiar because I know some of you are well studied. I'm going to give you the GHV, the Greg Hershberg version, the simple version, because some of you you go so deep, up Periscope and see if somebody's lost. Stop studying so much Targums, Talmud, Zohar. What are you doing? What are you doing? I want to know what you're doing. Do you think after you got saved, you're going to play spiritual Jeopardy to get into heaven? What are you doing? It's simple. The Jewish people said to Micah in a snide way, what does God want from us? And Micah said, you know what he wants. You know what he wants. Do justice. Love mercy. Walk humbly. That's what he wants. Didn't Yeshua do that? Didn't Yeshua do justice? Didn't he love mercy and didn't he walk humbly? Don't complicate it. Rabbi, people tell me you make it too simple. I can complicate it for you if you want. I'm pretty good with Hebrew and Greek and pretty good with Jewish stuff. I can spin your head if you want. But all it's going to do is make you dizzy. It's not going to get you closer to God. A wedding in first century Judaism had 3 parts to it. 3. First, a marriage contract had to be signed called the ketubah. Not important. It had to be signed by the parents of the bride and the bridegroom. This began what we call the betrothal period, or today we know as the engagement. The engagement today could be broken real easy. Back then, you were as good as married. You had to get a certificate of divorce, a get, to break an engagement. Different time. When we gave our hearts to Yeshua, whenever that was, as Savior and Lord, we got engaged. I know it's weird for a guy to think about that. I know it's a little weird for me. I'm a guy's guy. But we got engaged. Therefore, the body of Messiah on earth today is betrothed to Yeshua. We're all betrothed. Okay? The second step in the marriage process is when the bridegroom comes for the bride. When does he come? He doesn't know. Who tells him? His father. How does he announce it? With a shofar blast. Does this sound familiar? And he goes to the house of the bride and takes her away in order to consummate the marriage. Not supposed to consummate the marriage before the official wedding. Just throwing that in there for some of you. She is more than aware, it's 1,000 degrees. She is more than aware that he is coming for her. She just doesn't know when. She doesn't know, neither do you. So you know what she does? She always stays ready. She's always ready. Any day, anytime, she's ready. This is where we find ourselves right now, guys. We find ourselves in Matthew 25, 1 through 13, the parable of the 10 virgins. Now, I don't want to get into the salvation aspect of it, but know this. They weren't 5 virgins and 5 harlots. That would be easy, right? Are you a virgin or a harlot? They were all virgins. And they were all sleeping. That means we all look the same. Nobody knows who a believer is. They could talk the talk. We don't know how they're walking. Right? That's your business between you and God. The question is, are we one of the wise virgins? Or do we find ourselves foolish as we speak? It's very important we keep our lamps trimmed and burning. The great news is, Messiah says he will not crush a weak reed or put out a flickering candle. So today, if you find yourself a flickering candle, he could fan it into a flame in an instant. Now, there's a part of me that wants to say, if anybody wants to come up and be prayed for, you don't have to do that. Some people get off on that, you know. They call their friends, hey, we had 13 people come up. What are you, keeping score? It's not a football game, man. Nickels and noses. How many people were there today? What was the offering? Can you see somebody saying that to Yeshua? What's it to you? But if that's you, let me just encourage you not to stay a flickering flame. All you have to do is talk to God. That's all you got to do. I'm sorry for whatever. I've been being distracted by everything and anything. And I know what you're thinking. And I know you. I'm looking right at you. You're thinking, I've done this before and it hasn't worked. Do it again. Don't stop. Don't you let the enemy say, you've done this 1,000,000 times. That's him talking. God will never tell you that. God will just say, I'm so glad you're here. The third and final phase is the wedding supper of the Lamb itself. And it goes on for days, usually a week, like we saw at the wedding feast at Cana. This will be I love weddings. I love doing weddings. Every time I see the bride come, I start to cry. I just do. I don't know what it is. I don't really like parties, but I love weddings. Bernadette does too. We love going to weddings. It's so cool. And I always find it interesting. They never say the guy's name. They say to the bride, you take this man. And you ever notice how everybody's dressed the same down the row? It's almost like if he says no, you just move one over. Do you take this man? No? Do you take this man? Is anybody in the audience that's willing to be taken? You know, I do believe that the pulpit, you know, is not a place for jokes. I do. But some of you are so damn uptight. I mean, and you just got to make a light one because this is heavy. I don't know who in here is a foolish virgin. I might be. It's heavy. This is life and death. Do you realize when he comes back, if you're the foolish virgin, he has to say to you, he'll say it with tears. He's not going to say it like some of you would say it. Crying, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you because you didn't know me. This is serious stuff. Matthew 25 is heavy. Don't bury your talents. Make sure you've got oil in your lamp, because I can't give you none of mine, you can't give me none of yours. And last thing, what you do for the least of my brethren, that's not what you do for the guy in the wheelchair. Brethren means aldefates, and it means my biological brothers. Don't bury the talents God gave you. Make sure you keep oil in your lamp and stick with Israel. That was the 3 warnings he gave before he was taken away. If today you feel lame and you feel broken and you feel worthless, and I know this runs rampant, especially with young kids. If you feel lame and broken and worthless, I know this sounds nuts because we're so indoctrinated in the world, you're attractive to God. See, some of us, we love God. I know you. I know you love God. I know you do. I know your heart is His. But you're so caught up in the world system. It's just infiltrated, and you just think along the world system. 1 minute, you're praising God, and the next minute you're like, hey, we're supposed to get $10 more. You're out of your mind. Really. Don't you ever see yourself? Don't you ever see yourself? And then the next minute, praise the Lord, reading the Bible, the next minute you're freaked out because the check didn't come in. If you feel worthless, I'm telling you, you're attractive to God. He is not looking at your exterior. He's not. I know we do, but He's not. I'm telling you. I taught my sons when they were little. I taught them a lot of things. I taught them about life, and I taught them when they were little, don't ever let me hear you say that girl is not pretty. She might not be attractive to your eye, but every girl is pretty because God made her, and that's somebody's daughter. And that's what I indoctrinated them in. I just did. And my daughters, I said, stay away from guys, they stink and they're no good. And I indoctrinated them in that. You know why they're dying to go to college? Why Shana was dying to go to college and Lily? They're not allowed to date before they go to college. I see some of you 12-year-olds have a boyfriend. Are you nuts? Are you nuts? 12? You know how emotionally unstable they are? And when that falls apart, you know how ruined they are? They're like suicidal. You want to put them in that? But everybody else is doing it. Who cares? My kids never said that because they knew, that's going to be a 3-hour one. I never heard them say, well, everybody else. Never. Never. After the first lecture, they never, ever, ever. They stopped asking me questions. The very things that cause the world to shun you are the very things that cause the Lord to pursue you. And once you sit at the table, like I'm sitting at the table right now, right? Do you see my brokenness? You see my lame legs? You don't even know if I have legs, right? Once you sit at the King's table, all your flaws are covered. It's just my humble advice that you don't exchange your limp for a strut. So in conclusion, this is the way I see it. We were all dead dogs, living in a barren land, sold unto sin, and spiritually wasting away. We had absolutely no claim to sit at any royal table, no less the King of Kings table. We were helpless and hopeless, but God. In His infinite grace, love, and mercy, came after us. And once He returns, we get to physically coexist with Him without any defect whatsoever. Last but not least, one question for you. I know it was posed to me. How should I was asked, how should I, but how should you, how should we respond to the fact that we have been carried to the King's table? You know, I was raised in the Orthodox synagogue, and even when I came to the Lord, didn't go to church, went for a brief time, and then went into the Messianic synagogues. People ask me, why don't you sing more hymns? I'm like, why don't they sing Roni Roni at First Baptist? Dude, we're Messianic. But I have studied the hymns. I'm somewhat of a hymnotist, not a hypnotist. It's a real word. Go look it up. But some of them are astounding. And my favorite is by Isaac Watts. He wrote in 1707. He was a theologian, a minister, and a logician. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And it's When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. And when I was posed that question, all I could think of is love so amazing, so divine, demands my heart, my life, my all. Let's stand together. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace in the name of the Prince of all peace, Yeshua. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Yo'er Adonai ponav elecha v'hunecha. Yisa Adonai ponav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. I love you, and I mean it this time.